So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And today is a reason for celebration because it marks the World Day for Cultural Diversity, for Dialogue and Development. And this important day celebrates the many cultures that we have in our world and the critical role that intercultural dialogue for achieving peace, sustainable development has to do with our lives. And as you know, the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, one of the leading UN entities in the field of intercultural dialogue, promotion of intercultural dialogue and interfaith dialogue, has invited all of you because your work and through your entities, you've been working in the area of promoting cultural diversity, inclusion, and intercultural dialogue. And we will be very happy to hear from you how your work, diversity, inclusion, intercultural dialogue had been impacted by COVID-19, because we have seen around the world that this pandemic had put a pause and a halt to almost all the cultural activities around the world. And that probably has an impact on the work of our organization and your organization. So we would like to hear from you. Now, before we start, I would like just to give you some pointers as how this event is going to look alike. We will start with introduction and remarks by His Excellency Mr. Miguel Moratinos, the High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, to set the scene and the tone for this discussion. It will be followed by panelists that are representing the work or they are alumni of our work and partners to our work in the area of intercultural dialogue, diversity and inclusion. From Morocco, we have Afaf Lamkoutar, and from Spain, in Barcelona, we are joined by Joan Cuscó, one of our partners, and we have also Miss Yamini Ravindran from Sri Lanka, one of our awardees, most recent awardees last year, 2019, an IIA awardee. And we have Chaker, Khazaal, whom we have worked with in several occasions, and he has been a speaker in many of our panel discussions and many of our events. We have Nicole Banister, another alumni of our programs and doing very interesting work in sports, and also Mr. Kouani. And Mr. Kouani is one of our very good partners that we have worked with in Sri Lanka as well. Recently, just a few months back. He is from the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, joining us from India. So again, good morning for everyone. And I would like also to say high five for our colleagues from the United Nations Alliance of Civilization, Julie Ladenan and Thibault Charton, who are also joining us here and running this show from behind the scenes, or we see them on screen as well. So welcome all, and Mr. Miguel Moratinos, the floor is yours with, to set the scene and set the tone for this discussion.
Sorry. Yes, I am mute. So, good morning, everybody. I hope that everybody is fine and safe. I look to the screen, to this split screen, and I saw so many friendly faces. So, I saw in your faces and your smile that you are still of the difficulties, you are high spirits. No? So, I think it's a good start for this virtual meeting. I think all of your speakers to agree to participate in this new way to interact together in this difficult and unprecedented time. And I think that we have to start by recalling this special day. It was in 2002, when the United Nations General Assembly decided to choose May 21st as the World Day for Cultural Diversity, for Dialogue and Development in its resolution 57-249. So as Nicole was saying, it's a great opportunity to celebrate our world's many cultures and the critical role of intercultural dialogue for achieving peace and sustainable development. It is true that sustaining peace can only be achieved if we all know that, and we are working on the ground, that life, and we have to accept one another and to embrace other different cultures, religions, and civilization. But as today, when we are facing this global human crisis, because you should never ignore that this COVID-19 crisis is not a financial crisis, it's of course a health crisis, but above all, it's a human crisis. And the human being is at the epicenter of this crisis. Well, we have to remind that every day how our faiths are interconnected. If one neighbor, family member, friend, or country is not safe, then none of us is safe. We learn that our well-being and is linked to what happened to the next door. As such, there is no alternative to standing together in unity and solidarity for inclusive society, as we said in our logo, One Humanity. I think Sustainable Development Goal 16 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal is very clear. Building peaceful, just, and inclusive societies is more imperative now than ever before. And that's, to be sincere with all of you, I think is the raison d'etre of the UN Alliance of Civilization. Again, our motto is many cultures, one humanity. UNAOC was created to embrace and promote cultural, ethnic, and cultural diversity and religious pluralism. Our work aims to transition beyond tolerance to a step forward. That means to respect of the other. It's no more this tolerance concept have to be put aside. We have to go a step forward and look for mutual acceptance, mutual respect, dignity, and mutual understanding. Our work aims to transition amid this current crisis. We need to work even harder towards building bridges between culture and civilization. Every single effort have to really constitute one step further in the promotion of diversity. And that's come the importance of intercultural dialogue. It's at the core of our work at the UNAOC. And we therefore decided to invite program partners and alumni around the world who are doing important work in the area of cultural diversity, all of you. Today, we'd like to hear from you about their experience, your experience during this pandemic, what it has taught them, how they envisage our world for post-COVID-19, especially in the context of the virtual world and the physical distancing we have been dealing with. This event is part of One Humanity campaign of UNAOC, through which we have collected stories of solidarity from our global community. Inspire the world to stay united amid this crisis. You can learn more by visiting our website, unaoc.org. I'm very kind, again, to listen to your experiences. There is no peace with no development, no security, and no human rights without accepting and embracing the idea of strength and resilience through diversity. Our cultures are intertwined in a mosaic that shapes our world, and we're one humanity. Let me say that the best antibodies in this post-coronavirus is culture. Culture is the best antibodies for a good and mental health post-coronavirus. And we have to start to think, and you are the one who are going to lead us in this reflection, how we are going to perform in the near future. How we are going to be, conducted in a world where communication will prevail from forming communities. And there is a very interesting interview of the German philosopher, Korean origin, Byung-Chul Han, who say that we have to be aware of the danger of too much digitalization. So today we are very happy to see all of you. I'm very happy to see you. But can we continue forever in this connectivity model? Or we, the people that are working for meeting people, understanding people, interacting with people, cannot we start to think how we are going to organize ourselves in order that what has been the wealth and the richness of this intercultural activity can continue? Are we going to abandon the way we were working till now, that was meeting each other? Are we going to abandon the possibility really to express feeling, sentiments, and how we are going to understand the other without looking at their eyes and looking how they react after my words? Because now I'm going to cut, I'm going to hear you. And then, because it's 2 hours connection, we will not have really time to interconnect. So it's very serious. We, the cultural people, the people who are working in intercultural activities or in sport, like Joan Cuscó, we have to start a serious reflection. Artificial intelligence, of course. Digitalization, of course. But at the rhythm, at the disposal of the human intelligence and human life. So we are the one, because the other people will not help us. They will say there is no funds, there are no resources, because why we have to take care of the cultural activities, because of course the economic and social conditions are so poor. So we will have a very, very large impact in our budget. And secondly, not even that. So we don't need to have activities to move people. So we can meet through a split screen. And so that's what means the end of the philosophy of the spirit of this intercultural diversity day. So with that words, I give the floor to the moderator, to Miguel, and I hope we'll have an interesting exchange, even if it's a virtual exchange. Thank you very much, and I hope soon we can see each other personally, and that will be one fight of myself as the High Representative of the United Nations Alliance of Civilization. I will try to, undermine all the obstacles they are going to put to us, because I resist to become a member of only communication and not forming a real community. So thank you very much, and I hope we can extract some important experience from your own way to deal with your own work and engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miguel Moratinos. Of course, this spirit of resilience sets the tone for this discussion. Resilience and overcoming all the obstacles so that we can get back to a little bit of normalcy. Perhaps a face-to-face meeting cannot be compensated, of course, by virtual meetings, no matter how much we try and no matter how much and how good is the digital communications and the new inventions in the platforms to make things easier and more attractive for people to accept this virtual world that we are living in. And before I have 2 questions to pose to you, Mr. Moratinos, but before that, I would just want to welcome our good friend Chaker Khazaal, who is in Lebanon, I believe, still in Lebanon, and he just joined us a few minutes ago. Are you there, Chaker?
Yes, thank you. And hello, everybody from
all over. How are you? Good to see you. You are in Beirut.
Same here. Yeah, I am in Beirut. Yep.
Good to see you. We'll get back to you. But first, I want to go back to what Mr. Moratinos was saying, because actually this idea about the culture and diversity and inclusion being the best antibody for our mental health is another phrase that we take from you as a kind of a motto, because also you said before in several occasions that the 21st century is going to be intercultural or it's not going to be. I don't know if you still believe that this is going to be the case, particularly after we have seen that the lockdown and this pandemic has practically hit the pause button on almost all cultural activities and all activities that reflect diversity or reflect some sort of an inclusion. Hello, Mr. Moratinos, are you still there?
Me? I have to answer.
Yes, because
I thought it was. Okay, yes.
Yeah, the question is for you because
well, as I was saying to all of you, we have this. The impact of the COVID-19 is going to be absolutely extremely serious in all fields. So that is the new element of this new crisis. It's not a political crisis, it's not an economic and financial crisis, it's not a health crisis only, it's a global crisis, and all the sphere of human activity are going to be, attached. So my concern is that, of course, political leadership are going to take, I think, as priority the two main concerns. One is to stop the crisis from the health point of view, and nobody can anything to blame or to not agree with that. And secondly, immediately to really comfort the citizens and the people with social economic support. That's absolutely normal. What I am concerned is that due to these two priorities, the central element of the crisis, as I told you, that is the human being in the global citizenship and whatever we can qualify, is going to be put into a new framework. They will say, well, from economic point of view, you don't have resources, so we cannot really allocate funds and financial support because it's not a priority. And secondly, and that is for me the most dangerous one, this fear to get contaminated, to get infected by the virus, put us saying you cannot meet only social distance, as the French say, the geste barrière. No, imagine the wording. No, you are putting barriers between us. We are working for eliminating barriers and fortress, and now the normal life will be with internal barriers. We will not have the capacity of what a human being has been a social. Aristotle said we are a social living being. So if we lose the possibility to meet together and to interact together, we are going to really become a kind of already human robot. It's not the concern about robotization of the economy and the social life, it's that we ourselves, we agree to become like a robot. So we will be with our phone, we will go home, we will receive orders, and then what will be the free choice of all of us in front? And that, I think, is what the main battle of creating this one humanity that is revolting to the situation that lead us to this crisis, have to really start to think how we are going to work. So intelligent, I'm in favor of digitalization, artificial intelligence, but put them in order that facilitate us to meet together and to work together, but personally, not through every day through this digitalization model that don't allow us to really have the possibility really to make some creativeness in our work to be human beings, as I put it simply, bluntly, because if not, we are going to go, from my point of view, to the wrong direction.
Thank you very much. These are very valid points, and we hope that through the work that our entity is doing and other UN entities and other international organizations are doing together, working hand in hand with grassroots organizations, activists, and the young people like the people and the panelists that we have with us today will be able to make a difference and to change this reality of virtual reality rather, and go back to a little bit of normalcy where human relations and face-to-face encounters are not replaced forever by virtual encounters as such. And let me now move to the second part of this webinar. I'm going to we are going to have a tour de table where we are going to listen to each one of you for 5 minutes or maybe less, introductory remarks, and a presentation of what have you been doing so far. I would start with Afaf Lamkoutar from Morocco. She is in Rabat, and also she is a young peace builder. She has been in our Young Peace Builders program, and she did very well in the program, and we would like to listen from her what she actually learned in terms of peace building from our program. Afaf also, in addition to that, she is the founder and coordinator of Let's Coexist, and that's a youth initiative which was launched in 2019. And the main objective is to transform peace from an abstract concept into something that, or an action-oriented, something that you can actually implement on the ground. She has conducted with several organizations and professional trainers. The initiative provided also workshops for young Moroccans and sub-Saharan Africans on understanding intercultural dialogue and interfaith dialogue. So let's go to Afaf and listen to her. And please, we will appreciate if you can limit your remarks to 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you. The floor is yours, Afaf.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today in this amazing panel discussion. Today marks the celebration of cultural diversity for dialogue and development. So, Your Excellency, High Representative of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, Mr. Moratinos, dear Mrs. Saad, dear participants, and dear public. Today represents an opportunity to inform the general public on the importance of the themes related to major challenges and issues where civil society played and still can play major roles in promoting diversity and mobilizing its resources to raise awareness. COVID-19 knows no border. It is a global pandemic. So this experience we are living through is a reminder that we live in the same global community, which is the human community. In my perspective, even in these difficult circumstances, our initiatives and organizations can play major roles as a leverage power between different stakeholders and directly affected individuals. UNOC MENA Peacebuilder program is the ultimate proof of that ideal. Despite the fact that our freedoms are restricted due to the obligations of lockdowns, the digital revolution is fortunately here to maintain our commitment towards a more peaceful and just world. I am proud of many initiatives that were conducted through social media and which helped raise funds and support people in need. Another reflection this experience inspired me is that defeating COVID-19 is on the same level as defeating several stigmatizations and discriminations. Hearing some opinions associating this pandemic to a certain nationality or population is disturbing. Such events recall us that the struggle against hate speech and for diversity is still a long journey that we all need to take. Whether coming from emerging or developed countries, every life counts and every voice matters. COVID-19 is not an Eastern or a Western crisis. It is a human one. It should trigger a universal concern about the respect that we owe each other. There are lines of actions that we need to tackle urgently. These lines draw the COVID, especially the post-COVID-19 world as I wish to see it. First, every culture and every religion has something genuinely distinctive to offer to strengthen solidarity between human beings. There are tools that can help achieve such endeavor, and these tools can only happen through intercultural and interfaith dialogue. Second, during this pandemic, domestic violence, unfortunately, against women increased in many countries. We need the adoption of urgent schemes and plans, and this can only happen if civil society representative and organizations join hands with local authorities. Third, we observed how air pollution decreased significantly and air quality got better. This is another call to reconsider our responsibility towards nature and think of alternative ways to maintain economic growth without harming our planet or the natural habitats of millions of indigenous people and even more numbers of living species. Fourth, this global pandemic is a wake-up call. Actually, it is a wake-up call to invest in research and academia, and especially in young people, and giving them more opportunities to show their talents and show their solutions. And last but not least, I have a special thought for asylum seekers fleeing conflict zones and trying to look for places to feel safe and to be accepted as normal human beings. Let us not forget them, because we are one humanity. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you simply put in a nutshell, most of the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals by pointing out to all the points that we have to be addressing and taking care of. Basically, this pandemic is a wake-up call, putting under the magnifying glass all the issues that we have been trying to address and fulfill in the Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to, before we move to our next panelist, Joan Cuscó, he's the president of Beach Soccer Worldwide and the founder and president of Beach Soccer Worldwide and of Octagon, I beg your pardon, of Octagon Spain. And he had been into marketing of sports since 1985. And Joan is also an owner of several sports-related companies, including the venue management, sports events, and representation of athletes and brand marketing. We have recently partnered with Joan, but unfortunately we had to put our plans a little bit, postpone the launching of some of our plans when it comes to soccer and beach soccer tournaments a little bit after the COVID-19 and the situation is normalized a little bit. So, but before I go to Joan and listen to what he has to say, we would like to show you this video. It's a beautiful and very moving one that has been produced by Beach Soccer Foundation. Let's take a look.
We look different. We come from different places. We speak different languages. We have different customs. But we are all.
We are all.
天下一家.
ما همه یکی هستیم.
Wir sind alle.
Somos todos.
모두 كإني.
منا同じです.
نحن الجميع.
Vi alle sammen.
One humanity.
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 We are all one humanity.
Well, it's a beautiful video, and One Humanity, we were hoping to have this video played over and over again once we launch our joint project together. But also the video is very inspiring because it also reflects the motto of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations of Many Cultures and One Humanity. John, before this meeting, before we started going live in this webinar, we were talking together with you and with Nicole about sports and how sports, which is a tool for diversity and inclusion and could be was put on a halt actually because of the COVID-19 and how difficult it is to sort of repurpose and start to change the way we practice sports, whether we are players or whether we are fans. But I give you the floor, and then we will get into this discussion as we go around the table. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole, High Representative, dear friends. We talk about this specific later. I would love to explain the reason of this video. When I first met Mr. Moratinos, the High Representative of UNAOC, he had a very clear vision that he wanted to use the concept One Humanity as an awareness campaign all over the world to create sympathy for the UNAOC mission. He wanted to understand how sports and also music, in specific with me, sports, could help touch youth and the universal community. How can One Humanity send the message? So we designed this video. I'm going to talk to you later. Why sports fits with what we are trying to do? It fits because sport has a unique capacity to unite people. Regardless of origin or culture or religion, customs, countries, no matter where, sport is a universal language. Sport helps building mentality. We all share the passion for sports or music or other things, and this unites us somehow. Sport is a super powerful tool that transfers and transmits messages. A good example is FIFA Fair Play. If you look at this message that has been on the fields for many years, trying to change the behavior, not only on the field from players, but also on the stadiums, on everybody's fair play. Or UEFA has a campaign called Respect. Clearly fits what we want to achieve. These campaigns are already in the world of the sport. The sport, at one way, encourages teamwork. We play together, we are together, we have rules to play. These rules create a status of respect the rules and work together and making it work and improve them and making better. Same as the society. The sport bodies are the entities that have to help us. They have to associate with UNAOC, and we are working to make them get into UNAOC and support One Humanity campaign. I have to say, every single sport body entity that we have been talking during this recent period, everybody likes the idea and everybody supports. So we are happy to say that the campaign has a very good read. Also the athletes, whatever are basketball players or football players, with their conduct or their speech, they are models. They are society models. They have to help us spreading the message, but at the same time, showing this conduct and this speech to kids, especially to kids, that they follow them and they love them. So they are like a role model, something that they want to follow. We have to involve people at risk of social discrimination around the world of the sport, because it's something that unites people, and we have to bring them in. The same thing, we have to grant access to sport to areas of people or communities of low income. They have to have free practice for sport, because once they come to sport, they have other vision of the society. Although I hate the word low income, it's a word that should not exist. The campaign we have seen today, this video, is very simple. It's nothing, the most creative campaign. Sometimes simple things and direct things are more effective. Everybody can join this campaign, whether it is an athlete, whether it is a group of athletes, whether it is a fund or a group of funds, whether it is a club or whether it is a federation, whether it is here or there, anywhere in the world, people can join our campaign, because the campaign has just the backdrop, the background of how it has to go, the wording and the music and the ending. Easy, everybody can join. Let me say something about COVID-19. After COVID-19, the One Humanity campaign and the One Humanity concept is even more relevant. It's a lot more important. I only question myself, how would it been effective if before COVID, the world would have a much larger culture and policy of One Humanity concept? Probably the impact of COVID-19 would be smaller, because we would have acted in a much more global way. I'm fully committed, but at the same time, I'm fully confident that the One Humanity campaign in sports, it's going to be a big success. After the campaign, of course, we will need to go to the ground and work on activities on the ground with kids, with communities, and make it larger and larger. So I see One Humanity campaign for sports on a long term to work with everybody around the world in a much more universal way. That's my
thank you. Thank you very much, John. That was this confidence is also very reassuring, and indeed the video that we have just seen, One Humanity, is very simple. It's simple, but it's also very relatable to everybody, and it inspires everyone, whether even if you are not some kind of a sports fan of any kind, which I highly doubt, because almost everyone is a fan of one sport or the other. But then it is very inspiring to many people. We get back to the soft power of sports in bringing people together, in being a reflection of diversity and inclusion. Later as we continue our panel discussion, but now I would like to move to Miss Yamini Ravindran from Sri Lanka. She's a director of legal and advocacy, the Alliance Development Trust, the National Christian Evangelical Alliance of Sri Lanka. She is also the recipient of the 2019 Intercultural Innovation Award, which is a joint project that UNAOC is implementing with the BMW group. We met her last year in Madrid in December, when she won the award for the project Minor Matters, whereby she promotes religious freedom. And she won the award for that. The floor is yours, Yamini.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm honored to be part of this panel today. I want to thank the UNAOC for facilitating this very important conversation. on World Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. So during this panel discussion, I thought I'll address two areas. One being what has COVID-19 taught us during this period in terms of intercultural dialogue? And secondly, how do we envisage our world post-COVID-19 in bridging this cultural gap? So what has it taught us? Few things. One, with fear and panic caused by the COVID-19, it has also created an ideal environment for hate against minority communities through disinformation campaigns. And one lesson that we have learned is that COVID-19 has only intensified the need for us to actually step up, reimagine the nature of intercultural dialogue in our different contexts. So that's one thing. And in Sri Lanka, we have also seen how in a time of crisis, the rights of minorities, how it is so easily restricted for a greater good of society in terms of burial, cremation issues, and so on. So that has been one. Secondly, we have also seen COVID-19 has forced us to rethink intercultural dialogue in a new light, because with this new phenomena of we were discussing social distancing and this rapid growth of digital societies, it has actually pushed us to move towards innovation and also the need for us to explore new solutions to meet the needs of intercultural dialogue. So that's one. And finally, I think another lesson has been, it has also created a unique opportunity where it has created a common enemy, an enemy that knows no race, ethnicity, or religion. Therefore, it has created a battle where, you know, if we do this together with a spirit of togetherness, a collective effort, and if we harness that really well, that it could provide us with a very powerful opportunity of fostering greater understanding. Secondly, now, how do we envisage a world post-COVID-19 and, you know, in this whole context of bridging cultural gaps? Now, when we speak about intercultural dialogue, I think over and over again, we have been hearing about how contact and interaction between people is at the heart of it. So even as we discuss this, I think it's very important for us to now also start talking about bridging the digital divide. Because we need to bridge it, because looking at COVID-19 and the present situation and post-COVID-19, we understand what an important role digital means is actually going to play. So how do we bridge that digital divide in terms of equal access to technology for all communities, begin the conversations of digital resources, digital rights, socioeconomic, political factors as well. So I think that's very, very important. I'll just talk about maybe two interventions that the National Christian Evangelical Alliance has taken forward in terms of COVID-19 and looking at digital technologies as well. So one is with the online hate and disinformation that has been there, we actually launched a campaign on digital citizenship where we targeted youth and children because we believe they play a very integral part of intercultural dialogue. So toolkit, comic books, addressing topics such as digital rights, responsibilities, digital communications, and so on. What we really aim to do through this campaign is for us to build digital skills so that it will foster better relations online and interactions, which will hopefully bridge that gap between communities. And we are looking at developing mobile games. And one other intervention we are looking at is which UNAOC has supported us, and we actually won the award for, is to develop and launch a virtual museum with an integrated e-learning platform that will look at freedom of religion or belief in Sri Lanka, both positive and negative key events, and how our history has progressed in terms of freedom of religion or belief, and look at incidents which kind of brought unity and also incidents that, you know, created a greater divide between communities. So to look at a virtual museum as well. In closing, I would like to say that the world is unlikely to remain the same in this whole situation of COVID-19. So I quote UNESCO chairholder for cultural diversity and social justice, where he says, intercultural dialogue has played an important role to play as we negotiate new terms of social, economic, political, and environmental order. So I'll also end with the words of Arundhati Roy, the famed Indian novelist, who says, "The pandemic is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudices, our hate and hatred, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it." So it is our opinion that intercultural dialogue can play a very key role in ensuring the latter. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Yamini. And we are very pleased to hear about the two initiatives and the two actions you've actually implemented on the ground despite COVID-19 and all the restrictions in terms of resources and mobility. It's certainly one example of how you can be resilient and resourceful, and that you can achieve what you want to achieve despite the obstacles and the lockdown. I'd like to show, since we were talking about Yamini and her award, Intercultural Innovation Award last year, we have this short video on Intercultural Innovation Award that was jointly produced between UNAOC and the BMW Group.
Why does cultural diversity matter? Cultural diversity is a driving force for economic and social development. A constructive dialogue among civilizations is an essential prerequisite for social cohesion. In these challenging times we are facing today, bridging the gap between cultures is more urgent than ever. Since 2011, UNAOC and BMW Group have been supporting grassroots projects fostering cultural diversity across the world. From engaging stakeholders to further diversity across all sectors in Argentina, to promoting new ways of conflict resolution and cultural exchanges through TV and radio series in Uganda, from strengthening exchanges between India and Pakistan through youth education, to a card game from Sweden now used all over the world to bring people of all ages and backgrounds together. Our mission is to promote dialogue for more inclusive societies where diversity is seen as an asset rather than a threat.
Diversity is definitely a richness and not a threat, and it's more so that we need to enforce this idea and this notion more than ever before. I now move to our next speaker, Chaker Khazaal. And Chaker is a global citizen, and that's how we would like to identify him. And also, this is, I think, how he wants to identify himself. He's coming from the state of Palestine and where he was born, and then he's living in Canada. He's an author and he's a reporter, and every time we are communicating or following him on social media, he is somewhere around the world, and that's why we like to call him a global citizen. He is also very familiar with and he is very much passionate about refugees and about migrants, being one himself. And he has often spoken about the rights of refugees and immigrants. He is an author of many books. His first novel, Confessions of a War Child, was published in 2013, followed by part 2, Leah, in 2014, and part 3, Sahara, in 2015. And in 2017, he released his fourth novel, Tale of Tala, which also got a lot of media traction and was also one of Amazon bestsellers. It very much touches on the life of a Palestinian refugee and her journey. Life Dice is his latest productions, and I had so much interest looking into chapter 1, which he shared with many people. So Chaker, it was beautiful rolling the dice with someone who is as proliferate as yourself. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. One keyword that has come up with everyone who spoke before was the word fear. And this has been the language of this crisis. It's been the language of COVID-19. Fear. We are fearing what tomorrow is. We're fearing for our job. We're fearing for whether we're going to be alive or not. As Mr. Moratinos said, we're fearing from even someone who's infected. We're fearing to get infected ourselves. This culture of fear is also driven by a rhetoric that Afaf and Yamini touched upon, which is a little bit of racism as well, driving this whole fear engine. For example, out of a real example, I was in my hotel lobby in Beirut a few days ago. A lady who's from somewhere in Asia walks into the hotel, every single person runs away. I was not only disappointed at us as humans, but this is what Afaf said, this is a wake-up call. It's a pandemic wake-up call, because this racism, these fear feelings existed in us. We are seeing heads of state, we're seeing influencers even fuel this entire, I'll call it, train of fear. On the other hand, having a lot of followers, and I follow a lot of people, I have followers from every religion. So recently, and I picked 3 tweets that I really loved. One from the Quran, someone shared a verses from the Quran, وَلَا تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا عَسَاهُ خَيْرًا لَكُمْ. Never fear something, along the lines of never fear something that looks bad, it may be good for you. Another friend of mine shared something from the Bible, from Isaiah, through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And a Jewish friend of mine shared something from the Torah, the whole world is a narrow bridge, do not fear it. Now, the counterpart of this whole fear machine that came with COVID, and we saw a lot of influential people create this machine of fear even further, going by calling the virus with a name of a country, or calling attacking a whole community of people. So the contrast of fear is hope. And what we are lacking in so many areas, and this is why when Thibaut from UNAOC reached out to me, I right away said, absolutely for UNAOC, because this machine of fear, there's also machines of hope operating. There are organizations and bodies and entities and individuals today who said, hold on a second, this crisis may be uniting us in so many ways. Another real example, before the crisis, whenever I shared something or retweeted something that has of any religion, I always got at least 10 comments saying, why are you Muslim, or are you Christian, or are you Jewish? Today, when I shared these 3 tweets that I shared with you earlier, the reception from people was they were retweeting and they were liking. I saw a Muslim liking a Jewish quote. How beautiful is that? And how important is that for us to take right now, whether, like Joan was saying, in the sports field, or in the humanitarian work field, or in the education field. But I find that today, we as individuals in these little boxes we are each in, which Mr. Moratinos, I can't wait as well to get out of these boxes and give people a hug again, and like talk to people and get on a plane and eat bad plain food. It's fine, it's okay. We need it. But in our little boxes, the world has come a little bit more together on an individual level, forgetting about that politician who wants to create some controversy, or that head of state who has some negative feelings about a community or having a bad day that day. This is where our role is right now. Our role is to take whatever fragments of hope and of connectivity. The first question a Palestinian will ask an Israeli today is not whether he's wearing whether he has a gun or he's wearing a vest on himself. The first question he's asking him is, are you keeping safe? Are you okay? These are the individuals, not the governments. And I've seen it. I've seen it here in Beirut. I've seen it in my recent travel to Jordan. COVID-19 became our first concern. We got united out of it, but let's not be united out of the negative part of this crisis, there is the positive, the hope. And from there, I started a very simple app that people go to and light a candle. So while we're counting how many corona cases, how many deaths, this very simple app, you go, you count, you light a candle, you put a name of yourself or anyone else, and then we have a live map that will counter the coronavirus counter with positive how many candles of hope is each country lighting. These kind of activities, Grassroot is where it's fostering from our quarantine, and where UNAOC, where organizations on this field, we need to keep this communication open to spread the positive part of this horrific crisis.
Thank you, Chaker. Of course, I mean, we count on Grassroots and the works of individuals and activists like yourself and like all others in order to defeat the current crisis, and also to be able to overcome it with all its social repercussions. You talked about the Candle of Hope. Your campaign, Candle of Hope. This app, it's a beautiful idea actually, where you are asking people and trying to appeal to people to light a candle, to put light into a candle of hope and spreading it all over the world. How many have you been keeping count? How have you reached now? I remember that when I looked, we were something like 700. I was the 740 something. So how many?
50,000 now. 50,000.
Oh wow, this is very good. It's very good to see that people have this kind of hope as a contrast to the fear about the future and about tomorrow. Let's take a look at this very short video about the Candle of Hope. Well, Candle of Hope brings hope. I've also noticed that many people who had lit this Candle of Hope were also celebrities, and particularly celebrities from the Arab world. And it was very inspiring to see them light a candle and spread the hope all over the world. And in the little time that we have for the intro part of this webinar, I go to Nicole. And Nicole Banister, she is one of the fellows of UNAOC fellows. She's founder and commissioner at My Basketball Team Partnerships Coordinator at Grassroots Soccer. And she also, My Basketball Team is a digital storytelling platform that publishes short stories about relationships submitted by people from all around the world, posting stories anonymously every single day, sparking dialogue that eliminates shame and normalizes conversations around many issues. So Nicole, we had a conversation as well with you and John about the future of sports and in what shape and form it could be in terms of diversity and inclusion given the current virtual situation. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nihal, His Excellency, Mr. Moratinos, and the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations for having me, and to all of the other esteemed guests on this panel, and to everyone who's tuning in online. Happy World Day for Cultural Diversity. What a time for us to continue this movement of #OneHumanity and promote solidarity across cultures and across borders, despite the fact that many of our borders are closed right now. So like Nihal said, my name is Nicole Banister. I was a UNAOC fellow in 2017. And as I'm sure you can tell from my accent, I am originally from the United States, but I'm currently based in Cape Town, South Africa. And I've been here for the past 7 years. And I currently work in public health. So in my current role as a global partnerships coordinator for Grassroots Soccer, I steward multinational partnerships and relationships that use sport to ensure that adolescents have access to youth-friendly sexual and reproductive health services. So in this time pre-COVID, I was typically jet setting around the world, traveling to a number of countries across Africa and the Western Pacific, spearheading partnerships with stakeholders so that local community-based organizations could leverage our play-based approach to sexual health to create safe spaces for young people to understand their rights and healthy relationships, and to understand consent when it comes to engaging in sexual activity. So as someone who's sort of reflecting on COVID-19 from the world of sexual and reproductive health, this pandemic has been fascinating. Everyone is being encouraged to stay indoors, to flatten the curve, and to stop the spread of the virus. And working in HIV and AIDS, I know about viruses, right? But staying indoors, this concept of staying inside, is not safe for millions of people around the world, no matter what culture you're from, and particularly for women and children. And this is something that Afaf mentioned earlier. We're facing what the executive director of UN Women has labeled the shadow pandemic, where violence against women and children has skyrocketed. And it's in the shadow because it's happening in the background as the media is completely consumed by COVID-19. In general, 1 in 3 women globally will experience violence during their lifetime, and this pandemic has totally exacerbated that. Here in South Africa, during his most recent national coronavirus address, President Ramaphosa said that the men of our country declared war on the women. So this is a global, cross-cultural, growing trend, of violence against women and girls, and it's not new and it's not specific to South Africa, right? Bloomberg recently released an article on how China's divorce rate surged after their national lockdown ended. Kenya is reporting that 1/3 of all crimes that are being, reported right now during this lockdown are related to sexual violence. So I personally think that now more than ever, when I think about the role that intercultural dialogue plays during this crisis, and I think about global conversations that need to be had, we need to be talking about healthy relationships and sharing experiences and sharing best practices, from one another globally, and keeping that communication line open. We need to discuss how to ensure that, this home environment that we're all constrained to indefinitely actually keeps us safe, not just from the virus, but from perpetrators of violence. Nicole mentioned earlier, I'm also the founder of my basketball team, and my basketball team is a digital storytelling platform that I actually launched during this crisis. And I launched my basketball team in an effort to build community. Joan said earlier, sport is a universal language. He's absolutely correct, right? A team is a community, and this community in particular, and what the entire My Basketball Team platform is about, is normalizing conversations around relationships, normalizing conversations around intimacy, so that we reduce stigma, reduce shame, and ultimately reduce violence. And so, people around the world, different cultures, different backgrounds, they're submitting stories to the platform that we're posting anonymously to share what's really happening in their lives and in their relationships. And so I'm hoping that sort of by sparking dialogue and giving people a platform like My Basketball Team to share their experiences, we can curb this trend of unhealthy relationships. We can curb this trend of intimate partner violence, not just during coronavirus, but even afterward. And I'm confident that, as we continue to build community, albeit virtually for now, and as Mr. Moratinos said, hopefully, and even as Chaker said as well, hopefully we'll be able to come together and give one another those hugs in person soon enough. But I'm certain that when we engage in dialogue like this, where we engage diverse and dynamic people across different cultures, different backgrounds, different nationalities, when we come together, share our lived experiences, we will step into a world post-COVID that is much more peaceful, much more sort of in solidarity with one another, and hopefully we're much better off. And it starts with bridging that gap across cultures and having conversations exactly like the one we're having right now.
Thank you very much, Nicole. It's very inspiring to see everybody speaking with such passion about what they are doing despite the lockdown, and that they are having this kind of hope and enthusiasm about post-COVID-19 and how in so many ways we can overcome it, which is very reassuring that we are going to be overcoming it with work with the work that you and all other grassroots are actually doing. And indeed, the pandemic has put under the magnifying glass an issue and that everybody has been struggling with in terms of international organizations and human rights organizations about domestic violence, and particularly against women. And because women and children are now confined to their homes because of the lockdown, it brought under the magnifying glass this problem. Eliminating violence against women is one of the key issues that the United Nations is addressing, and efforts are on the right track to eliminate the numbers. But it seems that we are back to where we were with the COVID-19 and the rising numbers that we have seen regarding domestic violence. Our next speaker is Mr. Kouani, and Mr. Kouani is one of our very cherished and valued partners. He is working with the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. And Kouani also started his education in Kenya as a refugee and won the Indian Council of Cultural Relations and Symbiosis International University joint scholarship, where he finished his MBA and graduating as a gold medalist. And he is currently working in partnership with UNESCO and UNAOC on the project Youth Waging Peace. And it's with its focus on PVE, or the prevention of violent extremism. He's also a trainer for the UNAOC Young Peacebuilders program and the author of Enlightened Darkness, an intimate meditation on the causes and consequences of the civil war in Sudan. Kouani, the floor is yours, and before we start the panel discussion with everybody else.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure. I thank the UNAOC for extending the invitation to me. As always, very grateful. I want to thank and, of course, appreciate the work that you guys are doing from His Excellency Moratinos. I met him in Spain and I listened to him and I like his passion and energy, and I always find it intoxicating. And so it was good to hear him today. And I hope that everybody is safe. As I said before, I don't think I have the right to complain because I have shelter, I have food, and I'm able to do a bit of my work from home, which is not a privilege that a lot of people have. And I think that is something that we must recognize and tie down on the outset. Number two, it is also very difficult to speak after everybody. There is an old African, but specifically Dinka saying, which is, you just took the words from my mouth and now you've left me not knowing what to say. But I think what three key points, at least from my perspective, which is number one, we are dealing with a crisis here that we've never experienced before, in a sense that no one ever expected that the way to prevent a crisis would be to lock ourselves in the houses. No one. Most of the time, even systemic, most violent wars, they got us while we were on the run, while we were giving hug to people, while we were helping, lending a hand to one person here or there. And coronavirus all of a sudden has forced us into our houses. And so we are dealing with two things at the same time. One is coronavirus itself, and of course the consequences of the virus or the pandemic in general. And these are things like the spike in violence and etc. And so as much as I've tried to wrap my head around it, I'm not very sure of a post-COVID world, but what I'm sure of to an extent is that fundamentally, we are neurobiologically, in the word of Robert Sapolsky and Daniel Deverick, we are wired to be tribal one way or the other. There's nothing wrong about it. But what becomes a problem is when we, of course, glamorize our own tribe and vilify the other, and then bring in whatever ideology we might see fit to use against the other. That is the problem. And this is also where I think COVID has been an eye-opening experience, in a sense that it has transcended the tribal instincts that most of us have. First, it started in China, in Wuhan, and people are like, oh, okay, that is in China. I think I'm good in India, or I'm good in New York. And then all of a sudden, within a blink of an eye, it was everywhere. And people realize, oh, it is a global crisis. And so it has sort of, however unpalatable it might be, it has sort of also resuscitated or reaffirmed that common humanity is something that at least we should be living every single day. And it is very sad that we have to always wait for incidences like COVID to remind us that at a fundamental level, we are all human beings. Number two is, when I was listening to everybody, I think what was coming out is these spaces that we create for us to experience each other, which for me also are the most fundamental ways of transcending or expanding the tribe, such that the tribes become as broad and inclusive as much as possible. So sports, art, or even exchanges, or even dialogue. But cutting across all of this is what I think we've not been talking a lot about, but the role of emotions. We've not focused very much on building the emotional competencies necessary for us to connect with each other at a human level. We've intellectualized a lot of things. Of course, I'm not creating a bifurcation between the intellect and the limbic, but this constant preaching of all the good thing at some point has to be accompanied by the necessary interventions for people to connect emotionally. And I think Cuscó and Nicole and a lot of others brought it up. Sports, for example, people say sports connects people, but when you ask the second level question, which is what exactly in sports that connects people, then at least in my opinion, you realize that sports' ability to disarm the intellect for once is to disarm that thinking part of us that say, oh, that person is of a different skin color, from a different neighborhood, of different religion. The ability of sports to sort of disarm that and say, hey, that person can kick the ball and we are on one team, and we are losing or winning, or we are experiencing this moment together, I think is what is important in sports. And it's also what is important in all art forms. And it's also what makes them very, very effective in trying to bridge cultural or identitarian ideological divides that we humans have built and sculpted over years and millennia. Lastly is, for me, I work with a lot of young people, and maybe this is my answer to the world post-COVID. I work with a lot of young people in a sense that I try and keep them going. And in doing that, they also keep me going as well. And in talking with them or in trying to get them going, there is this emotional turmoil that is brewing in the times of Corona that not a lot of people are talking about. The consequence of the loneliness, the consequence of the distancing, the emotional toll that it is taking, especially on the most, on our youngest population, is something that we've not focused a lot on, but it is something that for me will resurface maybe violently in a post-COVID world. So we are looking at mental or accentuated mental health issues. And one way that we've tried to deal with it, at least, is curate these little interventions. Like we've designed activities for schools to try and implement in the online world to build skills of mindfulness, empathy, and say compassion, even while they're at home. And also the Kindness for Corona campaign, which has been running since the Corona outbreak, is something that has also been eye-opening for me, because human negativity bias always highlights the not so good things that have been happening during Corona. Of course, not to downplay them at all. There's been a lot of bad things that have happened during the coronavirus or the pandemic, racism, xenophobia, things like that. But there's been good things happening. And so we've invited people to share some of the things that they have done. And it's inspiring. And I think we should consequently and simultaneously highlight those. And so for me to conclude, the role of emotion is something that we need to resurrect and try and mainstream that in our education systems, as well as in our interventions to bridge cultural, identitarian, or ideological divides. I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you
for now.
Thank you very much, Kouani. Kindness and compassion are contagious as well, not only the virus, and this is the antibody for the virus, as I must say, kindness and compassion. Before we continue this webinar, I'm afraid that Mr. Miguel Moratinos will have to leave right now because he has to attend another meeting that is starting promptly. So we'd like to thank him and wish him a happy World Day for the cultural diversity for dialogue. Mr. Moratinos, are you still there? Well,
I think he left.
I think he probably he left because a minute or so ago, because he has to catch another meeting. I think he left, yes, a couple of minutes ago. So let's resume this discussion, because there are so many points that have been raised by each one of you, but there seems to be one point or few points that are common as consequences or as repercussions of the COVID-19. One of them is the rising stigma, stereotyping against certain communities, about minorities, and about communities that had already been or have already been marginalized. Perhaps there is, as I said before, a magnifying glass, and we see this problem again, something that we have been trying to fight, to combat, to stand up against, but yet this COVID-19, despite the fact that it was affecting everyone indiscriminately, regardless of their religion, culture, ethnicity, language, gender, sexual orientation, but the response, global response to the problem had been pretty much fragmented, and there was a lot of discrimination and inequity in terms of how we treat people, their access to medication, how we protect them and give them medical, or provide them with medical services, and how to protect them from the virus, and also in terms of vilifying other people who are not like us, or do not look like us or act like us. I would always say that each and every one of us is a minority, regardless, it depends on where he is or where she is. Each one of us, at some point of our lives, we are a minority. I can be a minority in a particular place that I exist in a particular moment of time. So I think that this gives one a feeling of how a minority would feel like when he is treated or she is treated as a minority. Kawani perhaps raised this point. He said that biologically, perhaps we are all wired to be tribal. There is nothing wrong about being tribal, but at the same time, the problem is when you start vilifying other people who are not belonging to the same tribe. We also talked about domestic violence, which has been on the rise, a problem which already existed before COVID-19, but we see it even more. We see a growing number of women and children who are being abused and being subjected to violence domestically now that they are confined to their homes. And we see also, in addition to the racism and the stigma and the stereotyping, we also see that there is a lot of inequality in the world in terms of the response to the virus. And I hear Nicole and the work that she has been doing in South Africa, and perhaps Africa has been one of the African countries in general, had been one of the concerns for the United Nations in general. And there were a lot of calls from the Secretary General that the world should not forget Africa and African countries who had been responding pretty well so far to the virus, but then that does not mean that we should forget them in the recovery efforts. One of the things also that we've heard from African leaders that we have talked to was how COVID-19 also reinforced the idea about the resilience of African people. They showed a lot of resilience in dealing with this virus. So I want to go back again to Joan, Cuscó, and sports, because one of the issues that has been brought up even with the other panelists here who, not particularly that they are working in the area of sports, but sports remains one of the main tools for inclusion and diversity. And the idea of having sports teams and the sports spirits being eliminated because we are not going to be playing sports or practicing sports, and the fans are not going to be attending and staying close to each other and next to each other in proximity, watching their favorite sports, is a big question mark on how the sports industry is going to be recuperating after COVID-19. And I'm not saying in the next immediate months, but I'm talking, let's say, 2021. John, how do you see this, the future of sports?
Well, I think for every area in the world, there is a pre-COVID-19 and a post-COVID-19, and most likely there is a post-COVID-19. I am usually a very optimistic person, so I hope there is a vaccine very soon and we can start behaving on the regular way. Because I think after COVID-19 there will be, on all this racism and conflicts that we see every day, there might be a growth, because there are communities that are identifying this. So let me go back to sports. In sports, there are different areas. One is athletes practicing sports. This, I think, it will keep going pretty well. The other thing are fans, because when we talk about, like in Barcelona, we have a 100,000 fans stadium. This is going to happen for the next few months. Maybe some rumors say maybe not even before first quarter of 2021. So when are we going to have funds? And this is affecting two different areas. One area is finances, of course, because all this is, we're talking about tons of money in a way. So the clubs and federations and athletes, everybody is going to be affected, because nothing is going to be the same. But there is, and Kwani was saying it very well, there is a very important factor on the emotional part, because sports at the end, like most of the activities that human beings do, are bringing a lot of emotion around, whether it's music, sports, culture in general. So if we cannot interact in the same way, there is a lose, or we are going to miss this emotional part. The sport might be going on. For example, German league has, soccer league has just restarted, empty stadiums, expectations of huge audiences around the world. And in fact, it has not happened. It has not happened because there is this emotional part missing. People thought everybody will be watching the Bundesliga because everybody was eager to see soccer or football. And it did not happen. Why? Because yes, there is the game there and there is a television, but it doesn't have the emotional part. It lost the emotional part. So until we recover of this emotional part, sport will never be the same. And this most likely is first quarter or mid 2021 to be back. So, and then we will rebuild, of course, the sport. Sport will happen at lower levels, at grassroots levels. This will keep going and improve and go well. But sport at most elite level, it's going to be massively affected.
Okay, thank you. Of course, there is no doubt, John, that, I mean, once there is, let's say, an announcement or there is a major sports event in the next, let's say, few months when things are a little bit stabilized, or at least we have a clear picture of the situation of the virus in a particular country where this big sports event is being played, I personally have no doubt in my mind that everybody would be very enthusiastic and eager to go and attend this sports event. So the point that I wanted to make is there is fear of the virus itself, but there is no fear of other people, as we see it being promoted by certain radical extremist groups or certain, let's say, populist groups and movements that are trying to promote and are trying to enforce the idea of fear of the other again. Because, as I said, I mean, if there is a major sports event or there is a major concert or there is a major artistic performance, I am sure that everyone would want to go and attend and mingle with other people. There is this eagerness and passion to start mingling with other people, interacting with them, sitting next to them. So it all depends on how the world community is going to be dealing with this virus in terms of science, medicine, medication, vaccines. I think this is what I think is what will make people a little bit confident and a little bit reassured that they can go about their lives in a way different from our normal lives before COVID-19. We can be a little bit cautious about our hygiene practices and about cleanliness and about other health issues, but at the same time, I don't think that whatever fear people have is from each other. It's about the uncertainty of the health situation and about the virus itself. One of the things that in the few remaining moments, I want to go to Chaker and then to others for 2-minute comments about the fact that we are all realizing that cultural activities and all kinds of human expressions, artistic expressions, and that includes also sports activities, have been frozen and put to a hold because of the COVID-19. And even there is this concern that things that were bringing people together and making them understand each other's civilizations, cultures, traditions, religions, like visiting museums, like going to a library, going to exhibitions, attending sports events, attending concerts, theaters, especially those theaters, folk theaters that are expressions of folk arts. All of this is not going to happen in the near future again, and that we will have to rely on virtual reality to go around a museum, as Yamini was saying, like go to a virtual museum or tour archaeological sites. Now, the question is, are we really, how we are going to be bringing or reinforcing how culture is important and diversity is important to our humanity, given that those physical events that we do physically by being present there are not going to happen in the next few months. Chaker, are you concerned?
There is a concern because of two things that we talked about a lot in the last decades, and so many countries did big strikes. Those are the infrastructure and the education. I mean, the infrastructure of whether it's the museum or whether it's a conference we're doing on here, how many people are we going to be excluding from our world if we apply this, for me in Beirut, for you in New York, South Africa, we still, we're able to log in and be connected. How many people are connected today? Half the world is not connected. This is a huge concern. This is where my concern is. My concern is not about Nihal or about Chaker or about Joan. We are, we are a generation that has lived through enough to learn, but I'm concerned about the communities that are going to be forgotten. I'm concerned about when Nihal, you mentioned through your talk about the radical groups and the popularists and all these coming in the mix right now. How vulnerable are the forgotten people in this entire shift of being? How vulnerable are they going to be, and how dangerous is this, are these extremists going to use this situation? This is where my concern is. So my recommendation would be, let's invest in infrastructure, and this I give the entire liability to huge corporations that have been bragging for the last 20 years about how innovative they are and about how much they have created jobs. Well, now it's time to connect the world a little bit closer, and the education, because we know very well that education is the only antibody of extremism, and that's the only way we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Chaker. Yes, I cannot agree more. Investing in infrastructure and education, but also, I mean, one of the concerns was when it comes to private sector. For instance, that they used to do a lot of corporate social responsibility projects. Under such projects, they were also serving the community and providing many services to the community. But probably now the focus the focus is going to be shifting in those private companies to what they consider to be the priority at this point, which is maintaining their workforce, perhaps also making sure that at least the production, there is a continuity in the production line. It's a concern because I must say that many of those corporate social responsibilities or the projects that fell under corporate social responsibility were really very rewarding, and perhaps we should be reinforcing that idea and reinforcing all the positive outcome of those projects to the private sector, so that they do not shelf or put these projects on the back seat, or they do not take a second priority. Afaf, you mentioned something that also a point that Chaker raised now, which is digital divide and the need to bridge the digital divide, because if we are going to be continuing doing many activities virtually, then there is a whole community. There are many countries who do not have this kind of luxury, which is access to digital tools, in addition to digital the digital literacy. I mean, digital illiteracy does exist as well. Afaf, do you have anything to say about that?
Hello back. Yes,
yes, Afaf.
Thank you so much. Yet it is true that a lot of people don't have access to digital tools the way we do. But at the same time, cultural diversity is about pointing out issues well and trying to put it as important as social economic problems today. So the concern that we have during this COVID-19 pandemic is that intercultural issues and challenges will be put aside because of socio-economic issues. So I recall when we were in Spain during the UNAOC peacebuilding program with Mr. Moratinos, and he said that we people who take the opportunity to be part of such programs have the responsibility to raise awareness and raise our voice and try to connect with as much people as possible. Digital tools are a way. Of course, they can't reach a lot of people, but still, we need to see the positive side of it, that we need to reach as much people that we can reach in order for them to reach their local populations that can have access or not to social media, and just raise the awareness as much as we can. Kwani talked about the ability, the dialogue. Today, we are more aware that we should not hide our cultural differences, and it is time to speak up about it. Of course, through reasonable arguments, of course, through a reasonable discussions, but in a way that we want to know about the others and we want to put ourselves in a cross perspective, to be in the shoes of other people and knowing other people. So I think if we persist and we were perseverant and we keep that activism and we keep the responsibility that we hold here and alive, I think we can reach so much more voices through so many tools.
Absolutely. The digital divide and the digital gap that has to be bridged is very important, not only because it also helps in connecting people, and we've seen the virtues and the advantages of being digitally connected when we are in lockdown, but also because a lot of essential services have been provided through online and through digital access, such as education, when all these children and young people were locked down. The only way to continue their studies and to complete the academic year was online. And of course, you can only think of those deprived populations and communities who do not have such access, that the education of their children have been destroyed. So I move again also to Kuwani. Youth Waging Peace is the most recent joint project that we have together. And I think that one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is how a project such as Youth Waging Peace would help in the post-COVID-19 dilemma that we are facing.
Yes, so to build up from what Afaf and Chaker said, I think the main idea of the Youth Waging Peace project was to try and create the spaces where young people from different backgrounds can connect and experience each other and learn from each other as much as possible. And in the hope that when they have the ability to inculcate the skills of criticality as well as the emotional competencies necessary for any peaceful coexistence, then to try and work with them to design on-the-ground interventions to go and implement in their communities. Now, in the post-COVID world, it is going to be a blend of the physical and the virtual. Most of the training for some of these young people, maybe 70% of that could be actually done online. And then the face-to-face part of the training could be focused more on connection instead of training, more of friendships, building these necessary bonds for people to be able to work on after that. And number three is that in the post-COVID world, I still think a lot of the rebuilding process is going to be led by young people. And that is on all sectors, including prevention of violent extremism. So restitching the society back together, I think, is something that some of the young people we are going to be training through the projects are going to continue to do in a world with or without COVID anyways. Yeah.
I think we have run out of time. I'm being told by Julie and Thibaut that I have to wrap it. I would have wanted to listen again to Nicole and to Yamini, but unfortunately we will have to leave it there. I would like to wish you all a World Day for a happy World Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue, and I hope that next year we will be able to celebrate the 21st of May. On the 21st of May, we can celebrate together on a face-to-face real event where we together are going to be talking about what we have done, what you have achieved in your amazing projects with your resilience, hope, compassion, and enthusiasm. I would like to thank you all, and
thank you, Nihal.
Have a nice Thursday.
Thank you, Nihal. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We're all here, living in this big blue planet, trying to be accepted, trying to be happy, trying to find peace, trying to find love. Sometimes life can be tough. The world can be a lonely and scary place. There is so much hate. It's not easy. But we have to keep going. We have to live and fight for more rights, acceptance, and love. We have to fight for a future, for the next generation, and also for our generation. Maybe we will stumble. It's not gonna be easy. Maybe we will fall. But the thing is, we just have to rise again. Some things we cannot choose. We can choose who we love or who will love us. We can't choose the color of our skin or the shape of our eyes. We can't choose when or where we are born or the day we will die. Some things can't change, but intolerance and hatred are not some of them. Yes, we are all here. We are all different. White, black, Asian, Latino, straight, gay, bi, trans, man, woman, and non-binary, young, old, grumpy, goofy, mom, dad, single, married, local, or immigrant. We are different, but we are also all the same. We're all searchers. We're all humans. We're all trying to be accepted, trying to be happy, trying to find peace, trying to find love, trying.